Alright, welcome back. It is time to take a look at the new cannon implant, the artillery cover. Now, that implant is very interesting because it does have some resemblance with high power coil. The way how the descriptions work and the overall effect is very similar, and the total, I would say the end result when you use the implant, I would say does feel about the same, but we'll see how that will work. Now, I'll be flying the Machariel because this is kind of the ship that comes to my mind when I'm talking about cannons, and this is also one of my favorite ships in the game. So we will see how the Machariel will perform. So let's take a look at the implant description, artillery cover. Let's click set active and let's read the effects. So increases ammo charge and firing power, increasing cannon damage by 100%, maximum 100%, and activation time by 70%, maximum level 70%. Enters fire coverage state upon activation. Fire coverage increases cannon tracking speed by 25%, reduces the increase to passive damage and activation time by 50%. So at first it does seem like this is very similar to the Barrage implant, although the Barrage implant does have a much faster rate of fire. Although on paper it does seem like this one should have much greater firepower than the Barrage implant, you will see later on that that's really not the case. It does have a very nice boost to rate of fire and activation time, but the Barrage implant's rate of fire is still, well, it is still unmatched, and the total DPS that you can deliver is also different. Optimized trajectory to increase accuracy, increase cannon tracking speed by 10% when attacking. The accuracy value of 50%, maximum 50% will be calibrated to the optimal range. Cannon tracking speed plus 10%, accuracy value of calibration ratio 50%. So basically, it does increase the tracking and it does seem to be increasing the total range that you will have on your cannons, which is going to be very interesting to see in practice, I would say. And maybe also we'll have some application for snipers. We'll see how that will work. But today I'll be focusing on the usual Machariel setup, on the usual Machariel build and its PvP and PvE capabilities with all the cannons. Now this is the first of the attributes, ballistic projection, and honestly I do see it being used for one thing. Am I going to use it? Well, it is definitely situational. I also thought about getting the implant, and depending on how it performs I will decide if I want to buy it or not, and hopefully I can also help you guys decide if it's worth buying or if it's, well, not worth buying. Will also be fun to see when it's combined with different general units, how will that perform. That's basically what I'm personally interested and very interested to see how it will work. Artillery support increases the long-range support strike capability of the cannon, increasing cannon accuracy fall off by 24%, max level 24%. Cannon accuracy fall off 24%. So this is, I would say, this attribute is useful for both old cannons and seems to be useful for artillery. If you have a sniper build, this is definitely going to be helping. So which one of these two attributes is actually more beneficial? Well, it is a good question, honestly. I would say if you are using artillery cannons, this one, the second one, the artillery support, is definitely the way to go. If you are using old cannons, then extra tracking is definitely going to be important. But I would also say that in the end both of these secondaries can get the job done without a problem. Ballistic charge, increase cannon explosive damage by 25%. It now penetrates 3% maximum. Explosive resists, but its kinetic damage is reduced by 25%. Cannon explosive damage plus 25%, kinetic damage minus 25%. Explosive resistance penetration 3%. So basically it seems to be reducing the resistance of your target, explosive resistance to your target 3%, which does seem to have resemblance with the high power coil, which does reduce 12% on all damage types. on the level 30 attribute. So this implant kind of aims for that sustained DPS, and it is aiming for being used for both PvE and PvP. Meanwhile, the Barrage is only a PvP implant for most cases. This implant will have use for both PvE and PvP, and will probably behave like the high power coil. Although it's not going to be charged, the effect will be immediate once you basically equip the implant and you click on it. That's basically how it's going to work. It has no charge, so in that aspect might be a bit, I would say, better than the high power coil, but again, we'll have to see how it's going to perform in combat, and then I can go and draw a conclusion based on that. But this seems interesting. Extra explosive damage, reduced kinetic damage, and also explosive penetration. Armor Melter increases thermal damage by 25%, increases thermal damage dealt to targets with shield thermal resist below 25% by 25%. Cannon thermal damage 25%, thermal resistance 25%, additional thermal damage 25%. So it does do extra thermal damage, but if your target has below 25% thermal resistance, then it's doing 25% more damage to it on the shield and armor. Although it's called Armor Melter, ironically, armors have more thermal resistance than shields, so this might be good against shields. Ironically, based on the name Armor Melter. So yeah, probably will be very good to just delete shields, and since it will do additional thermal damage. So I guess this might be good against some cavalry ships or similar. And full salvo enters full salvo state for a short period of time. After activation, full salvo fires a massive volley of ammo, delivering a indiscriminate strike at an enemy. While within range, attacks will deal a minimum amount of damage even if it misses, which depends on the weapon range, distance to target, enemy velocity, and signature radius. It has no effect if attack hits the enemy successfully. 30-second activation time, delay 6 seconds, firepower density 100. So this is basically like firing a high caliber or high explosive shell, and it hits close by, but it doesn't really hit directly the target, but it still does damage. So this might be good against tackle ships, against frigates, and ships similar to that. Even if you miss them, you will still do damage to them. So that's interesting, and can theoretically be used as a perfect anti-tackle weapon. But again, we will see how this will perform in combat. Now, what would I use? Well, as I already mentioned, I'll just use some well, random attributes. Although I like the Armor Melter. This one is definitely my favorite attribute of this implant. Unfortunately, well, we all know how much these implants cost to level up, so the main drawback would be the price. Like 100 billion just to get the implant to level 45. That's a lot of grinding, to be honest. But it is what it is, and I'm here to show you how this works. Alright, so let me quickly readjust the Machariel for, let's say, a PvP purpose. Now, the Machariel is a fantastic hit and run ship. It is fast, it has fantastic firepower, and also it has some decent tank. I mean, the damage control is really good at what it does. Extra activation time, always helpful. So the damage control and the overall speed of this ship does make it a fantastic hunter. Now, I'll just go and quickly equip the DPS, but I'll equip the ship with the rigs that I use on my own Machariel for PvP. And this is mostly because this is the build that is going to have a lot of DPS as well as some decent resistance. And usually a build like this will do really well against the average tank, average PvP, PvE ship, but it's not going to be that good against ridiculously high tank ships like navies and some other very tanky battleships. And I'll show you that in action today, since I know you guys are interested to see how this whole thing works. So I can tell you immediately that I noticed a significant passive DPS increase with this ship. Now, the nanocore is only gold, has only the primary attributes, nothing else added to it. It's just, you know, the default nanocore that I use. I can't click on it, I can't equip it, it's just stuck there. So yeah, it's still bugged. 5355.50 DPS cold, which is a 1200 DPS increase over the passive Barrage Implant DPS. So this definitely gives you a lot more passive DPS boost, which means that the implant is going to have much wider use now, not only for PvP, but you might be able to just effectively use it for PvE as well, for missions and stuff like that. So that's one of the issues that cannon ships used to have before this implant has been released, because the Barrage implant isn't as good for PvE as this one is going to be. Now let's undock and let's see the maximum possible DPS output. And this is where you will see very interesting results, because the Barrage implant DPS is obviously going to be much higher. Although I honestly expected to have a much faster rate of fire with this implant, since it does say a 70% faster rate of fire basically, or activation time. But it's not really working as it's not really working the way it looks like it's working. So this is where things get a bit weird, or should I say, this is where things get interesting, since the Barrage implant will have a much faster rate of fire. Meanwhile, this implant will have much better sustained DPS for the long run. And well, let me just quickly assemble the guns the way I like them to be, and then we can turn on the implant. This is basically how I build my own Machariel, with the module out and with the modules and stuff like that. So let's quickly waste all the ammo. I mean waste, let's just shoot at the station. So 5044 damage. My DPS actually went down. This is something quite hilarious that happened. My DPS actually went down when I undocked and when I clicked on the implant. And it kind of confused me at first, because why would the DPS go down? Then I disabled the implant, and now I expect the DPS to go back to its, well, original form. And I'm just waiting for the cooldown to finish, so that if the effect still lasts. So 5355.50 DPS is when the implant is off. So when you turn on the implant, it does seem to be reducing your DPS for whatever reason. And when you click on the gun, you can see that the overall damage has definitely went up. It definitely went up significantly. And you can also see the other attributes that have applied on the implant, that they also kicked in. So it's kind of odd, that they just reduces your DPS like that, but I guess it makes sense when you include in the math. And when I activated when I actually disabled the implant, you can see that the numbers are now default, which again is very interesting. These implants have, I would say, a small learning curve to them, so I'm just showing you how things work, so that you don't get confused when you get lower DPS than usual. And I'm also testing out to see how the rate of fire is going to. Well, it definitely kind of feels shooting a bit faster, although not nearly as fast as the rate of fire you have on the Barrage implant. And it would be very interesting to see the actual difference between the paper DPS, because this is one of the cases where the paper DPS isn't everything. Paper DPS on the Barrage implant looks horrifying and definitely looks terrifying, but in real use it's not much, as you will see in the PvP test that I'll do. And when I activate all the gyro stailers, we have 8180.79 DPS. Again, it is decent DPS, but much less DPS than what we used to have with the Barrage implant. So on paper, the Barrage is literally three times, quotation marks on this, better in terms of paper
Docking
DPS.
request accepted.
Now, again, numbers in the end of the DPS numbers really don't matter that much in the end. Now, I'm adding a fourth gyro stabilizer because this is going to be replicating a PvE build. Basically, something what I use on my own Machariel when I used to run it for high-sec PvE. They're about the same build, but the raw paper number, the DPS number in this case, is not going to be important at all when it comes to when it comes to the performance with the implants. Now, let's go and let me just double check something real quick here. Armor melter engage. Okay, just had to double check some things. Now let's go and do some. Let's run a mission, since I'm very curious to see how it will do in combat, and afterwards, if I forget to add the Barrage DPS in this video, or after I finish the PvE mission, I'll just add the Barrage DPS on screen as overlay, because sometimes I just forget. My phone is glitching all day long, and in some cases I actually lose the recording, so I can forget, or basically the recording can be completely gone, since if the phone crashes while recording, it gets corrupted and basically the recording is useless. I need a new device, I know. Very soon my phone will be replaced, that's for sure, because it's literally on its last legs at the moment. I tried to fix it, but apparently that's not going to work. I don't know what's up with it, it just decided not to work one day, and yeah. That's how this device will meet its end. Well, it's still working, but it's not going to work for very long, I can tell you that much. Anyway, let's see how this works for PvE.
We're under attack.
Now, technically speaking, any DPS increase is good DPS increase, and you will definitely have much better DPS. Well, I would say you will have
We're under
a much
attack.
overall better stable DPS with this implant and with the Barrage implant. Again, with the Barrage implant you have a very high burst, and it's usually in most cases a lot more useful for PvP. Just quickly burst down a ship basically, and that's where the Barrage implant shines the most. This implant does both PvE and PvP. It has a very balanced, stable DPS output, constant DPS output, which makes it fantastic for both scenarios. And as you can see, now I'm basically not hitting this frigate, and it still does damage. So this is basically the level 45 attribute in action. Basically hitting the target but not hitting it. It still does damage even though you're not hitting it, but once the effect runs out, you will start missing the target. So definitely works somewhat like a smart bomb, although not entirely a smart bomb. Works kind of like a high explosive artillery shell that explodes close to a target without hitting it and basically dealing area of effect damage. I would say it's a very interesting mechanic, but unfortunately the mechanic is kind of locked behind a 100 billion ISK grind. So yeah, that's the main. I think the main problem, one of the main problems with the implants, besides some of them being ridiculously overpowered, is the fact that they're way too expensive. They cost a lot, and I know that the sheer price of the implant does chase a lot of people away from even attempting to get implants. Although, ironically, getting the implant nowadays with carries and with a very rarely carry service isn't that bad. You can get the implant easily, but leveling it up might be a pain, and that's the thing that I'm mostly referring to here. Leveling up the implants is a pain, and I know I've dumped like 60 billion or more in my implants, and unfortunately I don't know what to say about that, because I did put so much ISK into it. It does work well, but in the end I don't really need to use them to get a kill or to do well in PvP. I'm good with or without implants when it comes to combat in this game, so I don't want to say that I wasted 60 billion, but it feels like I wasted 60 billion ISK. But yeah, that's just my perception of my current situation within the game with the implants. So I could be wrong, I could be right. or maybe both. Maybe it's just how it is in my case. I don't know. Well, I had to say that the implant does slap. It doesn't have any charge like the high power coil, which means that the implant is going to be constantly delivering the DPS stable. It does cost a lot to use though. I noticed that it does seem to cost a bit. It seems to be using the implant's fuel quite actively while being active, and it does seem to do some good. I mean, I like the damage I'm doing. It does a lot. It definitely does. It does very good damage. I'll say that it does very good damage. It feels like it is definitely giving a very nice boost. I think with the Barrage implant, I used to hit like 6,000 hits. Now I hit 10,000 hits. So that's definitely a 50% or 100% well increase. Well, not really 100%, but definitely it is there. It is very close to what the implant description does say. So definitely a interesting one. I was surprised when I noticed that it doesn't have any charge. I actually expected it to have the same charge as the Barrage implant. I expect it to have like 96 charge, 96 ammo, and basically it will work until the ammo is depleted. But it seems like it doesn't have any ammo. As you can see on the implant window there, it doesn't have any ammo. So that is kind of weird. Although in some cases maybe good, maybe not. But since it doesn't have anything to charge up with, means that you can only click and use the implant immediately, which in that aspect makes it better than some of the other implants. I mean, better, not exactly better in like the raw meaning of better, but probably easier to use, and your DPS will in most cases be much more stable than usual. So I don't know. From what I've seen here, from what I'm seeing here, I actually might go and buy this implant based on what I'm seeing here, since I would prefer to have stable DPS over high burst, although high burst has its own use as well. So it is kind of in the middle of, you know, in some cases Barrage better, in some cases artillery cover better. It kind of goes back and forth with that. So I believe in the very end it's not going to matter much what you use.
Engaged.
In the end, skill and pilot's experience is going to matter the most, but there's going to be situations where one will be better than the other, that's for sure. That's what my experience within the game does tell me. So we will see how this will work. Now I actually changed some of the attributes. I want to see how this thing will work with different modes and with different attributes and, you know, things like that. So let's see. Overall,
warp drive active.
Am I happy with the implant? Well, I mean, I like how it works. Although deep down below, I'm not really a big fan of the implants, because I feel like I enjoyed the game. Well, I still enjoy the game a lot. I love it. I mean, one of the only CCs who you actually can meet in the game. That's a fact. But deep down below, I don't really like implants because they changed a lot. Some cases to the better, some cases to the worse. I would say they changed a lot for the worse from the skill standpoint, because your skill used to matter. I mean, skill still matters a lot, but based on the sheer number of DPS, you can just melt the ship in seconds, and I would say that's the biggest problem. And the other problem is the high cost of the implant. Yeah, everything can be obtained without spending a cent. That's a fact, but it requires a lot of running to just get the implant, and then you have to run to actually level it up. So it's really a pain to get the implant to the desired level and with the desired performance. Now, the overall implant definitely kind of went down in price, but it's still ridiculously expensive. It's going to be, I would say, to an acceptable level if the price to get level 45 is maybe 30 billion or something. If the price is about 30 billion to get it leveled up to
Ships
level
detected.
45, then maybe I would be kinda okay
We're
with it.
under
But
attack.
100+ billion, no, that's just way too much. I mean, that's just ridiculous amount of ISK
We're
to dump
under
for
attack.
a implant. Besides, you have to think about the rigs, you have to think about the ship, you have to think about plaques, you have to think about all the other things. So
We're under
yeah,
attack.
it's definitely I can see why you know I can see the reasoning why a lot of players, including myself, don't quite like implants. But the good thing is that they have been nerfed over time. That's the good news. They have been nerfed over time, and they'll still be changed, reworked, or nerfed. I mean, in the grand scale of things, I was quite shocked when things didn't really go as I planned, because it still is, in a way, the same game that it used to be. Because of the way how everything so far has been working. I expected back then. I expected these implants to just delete chips in seconds, and in some cases they actually do that. But
We're under attack.
it's basically down to the player having a very bad build, and bad builds have been within the game for a
We're
while,
under
so
attack.
with or without implant, that same ship would get deleted in about the same time, with or without the implant. When you encounter a tanky ship, that's where things definitely get a bit more serious, and that's when you can feel that it is not exactly as the DPS on the fitting window does seem to show. Again, that's definitely a topic for a different video, but something that I wanted to mention here because I found that to be very interesting, to say the least. Now, from my personal experience here, I would say that the other attribute might be better with the thermal and with the extra thermal damage. I don't know, it feels like that one is doing a bit more damage to these ships than this current setup that I have. So if you have this implant on level 30 or above, definitely try out the thermal, because technically 25 plus 25, and if your resistance is below 25, it's a lot of 25. that's what I'm saying here. So definitely something that we will find out how it will work in the PvP test. Here I'll be throwing a very chunky ship as a target practice. Honestly, this implant seems to be working really well for PvE. Definitely, if you have a Machariel, or if you like turrets, and if you want to run PvE with the ship, then this implant is definitely much better than the Barrage implant. Much better sustained DPS, much stable DPS, and overall does seem to slap hard for quite a while, and doesn't have any charging so far from what I've seen here. Okay, let me do something else real quick here. So I undocked. I want to show you just the maximum DPS output that I can get with this current build here. So it will be time to test out the Barrage versus the artillery cover. And at this moment I'm still kind of being confused by the lower DPS, although it seems like it's giving you a lower DPS because it reduces the kinetic damage but gives extra thermal, and that's the reason why it does seem to lower your DPS, but the overall total damage done is going to be higher. So that is the thing that's going on here. That's I believe. In any case, it's still pretty good DPS. That's what I'm getting at here. Extra tracking is definitely going to be very helpful for a vast majority of reasons. It would be very good to shoot on smaller targets, frigates, cruisers. Now you have to be very careful if you're engaging a Machariel with a cruiser, because they might be able to track you easily. After all, the Machariel is one of the few battleships that I don't really prefer to engage with a cruiser, because of how much tracking these things have. They can track everything, which is honestly kind of scary. One of the few battleships that is quite a serious threat to interceptors and frigates as well. And besides drone boats, which are definitely the primary threat to the smaller ships. And the maximum total DPS that I have now is 8.5 thousand and 8.9 thousand DPS. Honestly, that's not bad. If it's sustained DPS, that's not bad. Or 9,471.24 DPS with the implant disabled. Very interesting results so far. Very interesting results so far indeed. And it's going to be much more fun to test this out in practical use. The thing that I'm basically after here is making a clear difference between the paper DPS and applied DPS, and of course the difference between burst and sustained DPS. Sustained DPS is definitely going to be much better for the long run, while burst DPS is going to be much better for the short run. I think that's basically self-explanatory, but from my experience, I need to say that because, yeah, reasons. You will be surprised, but yeah, you have to mention that, unfortunately, because apparently it's difficult to understand for some. But you know, let me dock and let me swap implants. I think that's the time. This is the moment where I swap implants. If the game wants to load, that is. Why is the... Yeah, my internet or my phone are dumpstered, that's for sure. This device is definitely on its last legs, that's for sure. Okay, opening up the implant window, and let's go to the Barrage implant. One of my first ever implants that I actually used. So, I'll just remove all the unnecessary units, and I'll have the same... Okay, this will work. Exact same general units slapped on this ship, on this implant. Let's undock and let's see what's the maximum DPS value on this ship. And this can be also applied on all turret ships. On dreadnoughts, on Naglfar, on frigates, cruisers, battleships, interceptors. It's going to be the same... it's going to be the same thing on all of these ships, basically, because that's how the implant works on cannons. Alright, let's take a look at the DPS here. Now, 4,429.07 DPS, that is, as I mentioned, a big difference between the cold DPS with the Machariel, with the Barrage, and with the cold DPS with the Machariel that uses the artillery cover. Artillery cover does give much better passive DPS. This is also pretty good DPS, but the artillery cover seems to be giving a bit more. And here you can take a look at the stats and the damage of the cannon. It indeed does basically double the damage, the alpha damage on the cannons, and it does translate into basically higher DPS. Now, 17,034.48 DPS with the Barrage implant. And this is what I was saying, that the Barrage will have much scarier DPS number here. But as you will find out, it's not as easy to say that this is a better implant. It's burst. It's not going to last long. And it can be countered. Ironically, this DPS is going to be countered much easier than the sustained DPS of the artillery cover. 24.9, let's see, 27.7, let's see more, 29,000, 29,223,000, 29,000 DPS. I forgot how to talk, my apologies. And just look at that rate of fire. Boom. There we go. Empty. So, it yeeted out all that DPS within 5 seconds. Which, you know, can cripple a ship if it's not built for it. If it's not built well, it can cripple a ship, but a proper ship is going to tank that. And you might wonder, how the hell can anything tank that DPS? It's terrifying. Well, the numbers are terrifying, but practically used, it's different. Practically used, it's not that scary. That 9,000 DPS from the artillery cover is much scarier than the 29,000 DPS from this thing with the with the Barrage implant. Sounds insane, sounds crazy, sounds like I have been smoking the weird looking plant, but you will see that's the case.
Accepted.
That's exactly the case what I was talking about. So let's do a little DPS. So this is with the Barrage implant. My target here is a Raven Navy, which is brick tanked, strong as hell. That thing is just a brick tank and has a lot of resist. And well, right now the Raven Navy is tanking what some would say carrier DPS, but I barely scratched the surface of its shields, and now since the Barrage is offline, I'm back to my standard DPS, which is about 7,000 until the Barrage go offline, and about 4,300 when the Jarosellers go offline. 1 million hit points on the Raven. And well, the Raven is alive! Could anyone imagine that? The Raven survived Dreadnought level of DPS. Well, and if this was a real PvP battle, I would be in deep poo-poo, because if you can kill the targets by the time your Barrage goes offline, or if you're not close to it, you are dead. That's basically how this works, and that's basically how this build works. So fantastic implant for a fleet, for a Machariel fleet. Fantastic implant for that purpose. But in the longer run, if you encounter something like this Raven Navy that I'm fighting with here, well, fighting with that and testing things on, then you will be in trouble. So, and it will take a while for me to see how little damage I'm doing to the Raven. This is basically one of the tankiest ships that I've built, and it is the Raven Navy that I'll build on the live server that I'll fly. That's basically, there's going to be the exact same copy with the build, and with the exact same build, with the exact same hit points, everything will be the exact same as you're seeing here. So as you can see, it does take me a while to get to the 50% mark on the shield of the Raven, which just speaks volumes about how scary, right, how scary this implant DPS is. So on paper it looks horrifying. It looks like it's going to kill anything in seconds. I remember everyone panicking when they saw the DPS of the Machariel. It used to be 55,000 DPS, by the way. It's nerfed a lot since then, and it's still nerfed. It's getting nerfed. This is basically the ship built for maximum possible DPS, so not really a big surprise why that's the case. I think it has like tier 4 rigs and stuff, so not really, you know, surprising. I made this thing to have DPS, but even that DPS, even with that equipment, wasn't enough to go and melt a navy, a Raven Navy. And this also can be applied to the Tempest Navy, to the Tempest Fleet, to the Megathor Navy. It also applied to the Apocalypse Navy. The navies and the trunk battleships can all do the same thing that this Raven Navy does over here. So I don't have to be that much panicked by the Barrage implant DPS, because as you can see, it is not that scary at all. It looks scary. It's like looking at I can't really find a good metaphor or analogy to this, but it's not as scary as, and very soon I'll have the second Barrage run ready. It does take a while for the Barrage to load, but usually with this current build, this Machariel won't last long at all versus something as tanky as that Raven. It would get torn to shreds in seconds, basically. So you don't get, in reality, in the real game, as if you want to call it, you are not going to get a second run of your Barrage implant versus a Navy with a full glass build. That's not gonna happen. No matter how good of a passive tank you have, once your primary tank's gone, you have to warp, or you have to kill a target, or you're dead. It's just how it goes. And that's what I'm saying. A good tank is going to kill good DPS, and that's just a fact, tested a million times, and it is something that is standing still the way it is, and at the moment there is just no other way around that. Just, it's a fact, that's it. But the tank of the Raven is still holding. I mean, imagine fighting with a Navy Raven for 6 minutes and not being able to go through its shield, and it's passively tanked. Now the passive recharge is insane on that thing. And you will see that I will be able to passively tank a Machariel with that build that I have on the Raven Navy. Passive tanking with a proper build is actually possible now, at least with battleships. I have to test the same theory out with smaller ships, but passive tanking is possible, and you can passive tank now. Makes me very excited for the next big update, since if they go and if they keep the promise of putting more passive stuff, or more passive recharge rigs, for example, buff the existing passive recharge modules and things like that, definitely going to get those, and you will be able to create a ship that's 100% passively tanked. We're very close to it. Right now with this specific build on the Raven, I have managed to accomplish being able to passively tank a glass Machariel with no booster, but just with a shield recharge, with a natural shield recharge, and that's very exciting.
Warp drive active.
Now, time for me to change the implant, and let's see how the artillery cover will work. So let's swap to the artillery cover, and this is going to be a very interesting result, because you will see a immediate difference in the amount of damage that the ship will do to the Raven. The Raven is in position, as you can see. My Machariel is also on the way.
Undocking.
And you might be wondering, well, which one is better for the average use? And that's a good question. Which one of these implants is actually better for the average, for the average use for both PvP and PvE? Well, I have to say, with this amount of testing that I've done, if you are
Warp drive
a pilot
active.
that does PvE and PvP, and if you want one implant to cover both, artillery cover is definitely the way to go, because it can do both easily. If you like to do PvP exclusively, if you don't do PvE,
How are you feeling?
then I guess the Barrage will get the job done, but you will also want to have the artillery cover for a specific situation. So in the end, I guess both would be good. If you have both, that's fantastic. That's good news if you have both. So if you have the time, I would say get both, but that's honestly down to the player in the end. I'm not going to say that this is better than this. Both are good. That's my final conclusion on both of these implants, because that's just how I experience it. That's based on the tests that I see here, and honestly, I like how I like how they work. Now, did you see the damage I'm doing on this thing? It basically is doing twice as much damage as the Barrage did, and now the Raven is taking some I would say more serious damage to the shield. Based on this speed, I'll reach 50% shield on this thing much faster than I reach 50% shield with the Barrage implant. I actually reached like 70% shield faster than I reached 70% shield with the Barrage implant. The Barrage already was offline by the time I hit 70%, so this is already a immediate, clear, massive advantage to the new implant when it comes to this situation, of course. So against a heavily armored or heavily shielded target, the new implant might be the better option. Well, I say better option. Against a heavily armored target, if you're solo, then definitely the artillery cover would be doing a bit more damage and would perform maybe a bit better than the Barrage implant, although the passive recharge is now slowly kicking in, and you will see that the Machariel will struggle to go through, will struggle to go through the shield, although it is still doing good damage, definitely doing much better damage than the Barrage implant did. Am I really surprised by the result of I mean, it is a very interesting time to play the game. That's for sure. That's what I'm saying about that. A very interesting time to be playing the game, because as you can see, the DPS that you can see on the fitting window isn't exactly everything, because there's a lot of other factors to include, and this also can be applied to all of the other implants, with few exceptions. The bombard tactic, which doesn't show the DPS for whatever reason, and I think there's one more implant that I forgot the name of, but the bombard tactic is the only one that comes to my mind when it comes to being broken beyond belief. That one is still broken beyond belief and will remain broken beyond belief until it's nerfed. I'm not changing my opinion on that, but this implant does definitely do a good job. And as you can see, I'm actually getting to low shield on the Raven much faster than I did with the Barrage implant, which again, it is to be expected. This implant has a much longer duration, lasts much longer, has much more stable DPS, and it seems like it is doing overall more damage than the Barrage. It doesn't do the burst damage, it doesn't do the short burst, that's a fact. It can do the short burst because it simply lacks the rate of fire for it, but it has a very stable DPS output that, as you can see, delivers a very nice DPS up. I mean, I think with artillery cannons this is also going to be very nasty. Although with artillery cannons, with the big artillery, you might want to use the Barrage implant for the cannons, because they will do a lot more damage. They have a lot more alpha and they slap really hard with the high rate of fire. But again, I'll have to test that out in a different video. It would be a very interesting test to see if this implant will win in both scenarios when it comes to the DPS, since the artillery cannons have much greater alpha damage. So will be fun to see how that works and how that goes. That's another test for a different video, because this video is already long, so I don't want to make it even longer. Would need like 30 more minutes for that one, so I'll just do that in a different video. But yeah, that was the artillery cover and the Barrage implant. Both were good. I like both of them, and depending on the next little test that I do, it will basically decide if I want to get this implant or if I don't want to get it. So, but with that being said, I hope that I could help you guys to decide if you want to get this implant. Again, I like it, how it works, it's interesting, and it has a very good use for both PvP and PvE. So, yeah, that was basically the goal for this little test, and
Warp drive active.
I'm very interested to see what's the next thing that we get to the game. So with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. If you want to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, play safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.